Across 1929, the world learned how quickly prosperity can flip into fear. One day, Wall Street seemed untouchable. Days later, it was wreckage. Fortunes dissolved, bank doors locked, and ordinary families watched savings disappear. Many treat that collapse as a finished tale, a museum piece. But what if the same weather still hangs over us, shaping choices you make every week? If you've asked why prices creep higher, why owning a home feels distant, or why debt outruns paychecks, you're in a large crowd. The pattern around you isn't random noise. It's the echo of a framework built on leverage, confidence, and stories that make risk look safe. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Seeing the map light up never gets old. And if you like clear, grounded explanations of money, markets, and power, subscribe now, because this episode will change how you decode the news. By the way, if you love money, subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Now, let's continue. Roll the timeline back to 1929. Euphoria ruled the tape. Stocks marched upward week after week. Teachers, farmers, mechanics, people with steady jobs borrowed to buy shares on margin because the chart seemed to only point north. Headlines declared a new era of wealth. Sound familiar? Technology dazzled, credit looked cheap, and politicians promised growth without limits. Behind the bright stage lights, the set was the same. Debt stacked on debt, held together by belief. Speculation spread beyond equities. Real estate boomed. Banks lent freely. Corporations pumped up profits with creative accounting. Households took home radios, appliances, and cars through installment plans. It was a culture of optimism built with borrowed lumber. Then came the panic. In late October, selling surged. Bids vanished. Prices caved in. Billions of paper wealth were erased in days. The machine that had looked invincible revealed its hollow center. But here is the key insight. The crash did not cause the Great Depression, it exposed it. The deeper sickness was structural, too much leverage, too little real income, and too much faith in prices to solve problems. The rhyme with our time is hard to miss. Ticker tape and telegrams became mobile apps and crypto feeds. Margin loans turned into credit cards, long mortgages, and public deficits counted in trillions. Consumption still powers growth. Confidence still powers consumption. And confidence is brittle. When trust feels solid, people borrow, spend, and invest. When it falters, activity freezes. That switch was the story in 1929, and it is the fear now. Debt first. In the late 1920s, households stretched to buy modern life cars, radios, better homes, on the assumption that wages and prices would rise forever. In our era, total obligations across households, companies, and governments scale to a multiple of global output. The costumes changed, the script didn't. Lenders once sold risky promises as opportunity. Now they come wrapped inside structured products and friendly apps. The instruments evolve, the human impulse does not. Inequality then climbed to extraordinary levels. A narrow elite gathered wealth while the majority leaned on credit and optimism. When the bubble burst, most had little cushion. Look around today. Asset owners sprint ahead, wage growth lags, and the middle relies on borrowing to bridge the gap. Old pattern, new logos. Central bankers in the 1920s kept rates low to fuel activity and then raised them fast when inflation appeared, squeezing credit and sparking panic. Their heirs faced the same fork, cut to protect jobs and balance sheets, or hike to rein in prices. Each path exacts a cost. Speculation rhymes too. In 1929, crowds bought companies they barely understood because neighbors were getting rich. Today it's meme squeezes, digital tokens, and momentum loops. The motives are constant: fear of missing out, optimism captured by rising lines, and the promise of easy gains. When markets go up, everyone feels like a genius. When they fall, luck gets blamed. The Great Depression taught a blunt lesson. Systems that become both unequal and over-leveraged eventually fall under their own weight. The debate is not if, but when. Much modern prosperity rides on what might be called borrowed confidence. Indicators flash. Record household liabilities. Stress in corporate credit. Public finances stretched. One difference increases the stakes. Scale. In the 1930s, financial shock was mostly national. Now, finance is a single web. A fracture in one node can vibrate through continents in minutes. The network is bigger, not necessarily stronger. The failure in 1929 was not only arithmetic, it was imagination. People mistook momentum for permanence. We repeat the error when we assume that central banks and lawmakers can always hold the line. Stability built on leverage and soaring valuations is stability on lease. The lesson was not learned, it was archived. Each generation believes its tools make old mistakes obsolete, and each generation meets those mistakes in new clothes. The downturn started with bad days on the exchange and bled into years of deflation and distrust. The risk isn't that history copies itself, it's that we reenact its rhythm while insisting we're different. By the early 1930s, the mirage was gone. Breadlines stretched, thousands of banks failed, and families lost homes and hope. A market panic became a social crisis. Governments grabbed familiar levers, cut spending, raised tariffs, and talk about discipline while unemployment climbed. The decade-long wound reshaped politics and economics. Today, when cracks appear, leaders reach for new versions of the same levers. Rate cuts, quantitative programs, sweeping guarantees. They soothe symptoms while causes persist. The global machine is now lashed together by interventions and public belief, and belief is the most delicate part. Leverage powered the mania. In the 1920s, investors often borrowed most of a stock's price. Small dips triggered margin calls, forced liquidations, and cascades. In modern markets, leverage hides in layered trades, derivatives, and shadow balance sheets. The plumbing grew complicated. The basic hazard remained. Too much risk carried on too little capital, often justified by models that assume yesterday looks like tomorrow. When reality shifts, the scaffolding fails. Trust collapses first in markets and then in institutions. Deposit insurance helped after the 1930s, but the system today is global. A failure at one bank can push anxiety across borders in an afternoon. What made 1929 most dangerous was psychological. Progress had hardened into a creed. Prosperity felt like destiny. When the creed broke, people did not just lose wealth, they lost belief. For years, we have been told that smart policy can mute recessions and that crashes are relics. Yet each rescue requires more debt, more intervention, and more distortion. Each rescue also plants seeds for the next emergency. The 1930s showed how intertwined economies were. American distress toppled European institutions burdened by war debts. Political rage followed. Pain never stays inside the first country. Today, obligations bind the map. A sovereign default here, a currency break there, or a failed auction can ripple with speed. The frame is larger, the beams are not thicker. Policymakers routinely confuse leverage with panic. Liquidity can calm. It cannot cure insolvency. Printing money cannot produce factories or skills. It delays recognition of losses. Delay raises the bill. Another rhyme. Asset prices that run ahead of fundamentals. In the 1920s, a story claimed that new technology made old yardsticks obsolete. In our era, we again see valuations that demand perfection. Firms that burn cash still trade like legends because the narrative is powerful. Bubbles end with the same sequence. Confidence breaks, credit tightens, prices fall. Timing shifts. 1929 was abrupt. Modern policy can slow the descent until it cannot. Arithmetic still wins. Obligations that grow faster than income cannot be serviced forever. Inequality is the companion rhythm. Before the crash, a narrow elite owned assets while the rest lived on installment credit. Losses hit unevenly. Today, asset inflation rewards holders, wages crawl, and households feel richer on paper because homes appreciate often on borrowed money. When rates climb, the glow fades and stress appears. Politics then absorbs the strain. The 1930s brought protectionism and populism. We see echoes, distrust of institutions, anger at the distribution of gains, and a sense that the ladder is being pulled up. Austerity once promised confidence and delivered contraction. Unlimited stimulus promises comfort and risks decay. Durable prosperity requires a balance. Debt should fund production. Policy should reward patience, and incentives should point beyond the next quarter. Speculation changed in speed more than spirit. Crowds once stood outside brokerage windows scanning tickers. Now, trades execute in microseconds. Derivatives stack on derivatives. Algorithms chase the same signals, producing self-reinforcing loops. Velocity amplifies fragility. When the mood turns, liquidity can evaporate before breakfast. What took days can now unfold between coffee and commute. Yet, resilience also emerged. Out of ruin came reform, deposit insurance, oversight, and safety nets. None alone ended the Depression, but together they slowed the bleeding and rewrote rules. Over time, though, emergency tools ossified into doctrine. Once leaders learned they could steady markets with intervention, investors learned to expect rescue. Risk became socialized, and rewards stayed private. Deflation terrified policymakers. A steady level of inflation became the acceptable pain. Inflation, however, subtly transfers wealth from savers to borrowers, from wages to assets. Because the unit in which we store effort weakens year after year, the system adapts to the transfer and resists honest price declines. Globalization knit balance sheets across oceans. Capital crosses borders at light speed. Derivatives tie institutions together. A poorly timed policy choice in one capital echoes in others within minutes. The architecture that dispersed opportunity now multiplies risk. Small fires send smoke everywhere. As growth slows and gaps widen, political tempers harden, and institutions face stress tests in real time. Arithmetic has the final vote. No ideology outruns it. When debt outgrows the capacity to repay, societies must choose paths: default, inflation, taxation, or efficiency gains large enough to bridge the gap. Households feel policy through bills. When central banks tighten, mortgages rise, housing cools, and hiring slows. Abstractions turn into rent due. Technology compresses cycles. In the 1920s, quotes crawled on paper. Now signals fire in code. One rule sells because another did. Cascades require no conspiracy, only feedback. History does not only warn, it teaches preparation. Diversify exposures. Test plans against stress. Treat confidence as a finite resource. Value rests on trust. Trust rests on discipline. Crashes typically sprout in belief. Broad conviction that this time is different. The danger is not repetition alone. It is comfort with repetition. Each generation thinks its steering is superior. Each learns the loudness of leverage. When the dust settled, the United States rewired parts of its system. Regulations thickened, deposits gained insurance, public works expanded. The state accepted responsibility for some measure of stability. But success created new fragility. Rescues breed expectation. Expectation breeds risk-taking that counts on the next rescue. Emergency scripts became standard practice. Deflation scars persuaded leaders to tolerate inflation that quietly eats savings and rewards borrowing. The transfer is constant and largely invisible. The global web guarantees that a misstep in one corner ricochets through others. Interconnection spreads prosperity in calm weather and multiplies damage in storms. The same links that carry goods and ideas also transmit stress. When a link breaks, contagion can outrun diagnosis. That is why modest shocks produce global tremors. The scaffolding doesn't merely hold weight, it amplifies it. The original crash rested on faith that markets self-correct. Our age leans on faith that policy can always rescue. Both beliefs ignore limits. No system evades arithmetic indefinitely. When speculation outruns production and promises outrun income, adjustment follows. Denial delays it and enlarges it. In 1929, a farmer in Kansas did not see how Wall Street's leverage would touch wheat prices. When credit froze, he learned fast. Today the wiring is denser, but the logic holds. Policy shifts move mortgages. Mortgages move construction. Construction moves jobs. The equation becomes a pink slip. Technology changes scale, not human nature. Ticker tape once printed in minutes. Code acts in milliseconds. Fear and euphoria now travel at machine speed. That compression can convert a stumble into a slide. Yet reform can arrive before breakage. We know the warning signs. Obligations that swell faster than incomes. Asset prices untethered from cash flows. Gains concentrated and buffers thin. We also know the repertoire. Invest in productivity, practice fiscal prudence, and build institutions that deserve trust through transparency and results. The recurring flaw is denial. Early declines are explained away as healthy. Officials soothe with assurances. Bankers defend fundamentals even when balance sheets contradict them. By the time the diagnosis is admitted, the structure has usually cracked. That rhythm repeats. When valuations float above gravity and stability is promised on every podium, stress often accumulates where nobody looks. Later, a small failure becomes the match. Commentators call it a surprise, though the fuel was stacked for years. So, where does that leave us? Growth slows, obligations rise, anger over inequality intensifies, institutions strain, and technology accelerates feedback. The pattern is familiar. The backdrop is new. The useful response is not panic, but discipline. Systems fail when trust erodes. They recover when trust is rebuilt on production, prudence, and fair chances. Take inventory, your savings, obligations, and options. The ghost of 1929 is not trapped in archives. It lives in choices that chase narrative over cash flow and comfort over candor, in mistaking a bull run for true prosperity. Crashes don't arrive as thunderclaps from nowhere. They grow quietly inside consensus. Ask the hard question. If 1929 arrived wearing modern branding, would we recognize it early? Or have we built a machine so fast and self-confident that it cannot see its reflection? Your answer matters. If this episode reframed how you read the economy, share your view below. Are we wiser now, or walking the same path in better suits? History hasn't ended. It repeats in slow motion, and we decide whether to learn before the turn or after it. If you made it this far, drop a plus in the comments, your badge for finishing the deep dive. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more long-form stories where money, history, and power collide. Curious about earlier empires of capital? Check out our others video.